Pranamaha to all of you. Let's start with the invocation mantra. Om. Sahana bhavatu, Sahanau bhunaktu, Sahaviryam karavavahai. तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। Pranam to all of you. We welcome once again on our final day of IKS-TKDL workshop on traditional knowledge, intellectual property, and people's rights. Today we are very honored. We have with us Madam Dr. Vishwajanani Satyagiri and Sir Mr. Anil Kumar. So we can start today's session, and before that we just want to say today's session will be conducted in two parts. The first part will be taken by Madam and it will be followed by the second session, that is the assignment part. So we request all of you please pay the attention, and you will be given 40 MCQs and the time is 45 minutes for your assessment. So let's start with a brief introduction of Madam. So last day we did not have the scope. We did not have the scope. Madam is scientist H and the head of CSIR Traditional Knowledge Digital Library Unit. The TKDL is a tool for defensive protection of Indian traditional knowledge, currently Indian systems of medicine. The TKDL currently contains information of about 4.6 lakh formulations and practices from Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, Shoa, Rigpa, and Yoga. She has initiated steps for expanding the scope and database of TKDL. At CSIR, she had also handled matters pertaining to strategic planning, monitoring and discussion, and policy insights. Prior to CSIR, she was associated with the New Drug Discovery Research and at Ranbaxy Research Laboratories Limited. She had various drug discovery programs across different therapeutic areas. Madam was also instrumental in progressing a drug candidate to phase 2 clinical trial for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease COPD under the GlaxoSmithKline-Ranbaxy collaboration. Later at Smart Analyst Private Limited, a market consultancy firm, she was responsible for providing decision analytics support to big pharma and biotech companies in the US and Europe, among all countries working in the domains of pharmaceuticals and drugs. She has led interdisciplinary teams in her various roles. Madam, we are very honored to have you. Please start your session. Madam, you are muted. Could you please check? Yes, yes. Please.
Thank you. Thank you so much for a very elaborate introduction. I don't think we need it. I think many of the participants already are aware of where we come from. Anyway, thank you so much, Piyush, for the introduction and also for coordinating the workshop so effective. Thank you very much. So without much ado, let me go share my presentation. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you see this?
Yes. Could you please check it's moving or not? Yes. Yes. It's moving.
It's moving?
It's perfect. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
all
ma'am.
right. Okay, thank you. Thanks again, Piyush and Anil, for this workshop, coordinating the workshop and doing it effectively. To all the participants, namaste. Thank you all for your support and being with us for all these 5 days. I'm sure you're all excited as I in bringing this workshop to a closure effectively. And here we are, in terms of the schedule. So today is the 5th day. The last 4 days of the workshop, that is on day 1, you got to understand what the Indian knowledge systems is all about, how diverse and expansive this entire knowledge system is, and what is it that we can do in terms of promoting it and taking it further. But when we are talking of promoting and taking it further, and also in its own native form, the people's rights and the intellectual property rights related to traditional knowledge have great significance, and that is what we had covered in day 2, 3, and 4. We talked about the ethics of handling traditional knowledge, specifically because when we are talking of oral traditional knowledge that has been transmitted from one generation to the other, this knowledge belongs to the individual or the communities that own the knowledge, and therefore we need to handle such matters with great respect and sensitivity towards the livelihood of the people. So today we are on the final day of the workshop. Today I'll just give you an overview, a glimpse of what TK-inspired innovations can be, what is the potential, and what is the road ahead. So after my talk, we'll have a question and answer session for a few minutes, and thereafter we'll be closing the workshop with an assessment. That is when you will be getting the link from Piyush, and I request all of you to take the assessment, because without participation in the assessment, you will not be given any certificate. So all the best to all the participants who have been through this journey of this workshop over the last few days. Thank you once again. So today, as I mentioned, we'll be talking about the TK-inspired innovations, the potentials and the road ahead. And I also mentioned in my first day of the talk that traditions and culture happen to be very important because they are the foundations on which we have grown, our ancestors have grown, and we are right now what we are, having inherited much of the traditions and culture. So when we are talking of the sustainable development goals, there are 17 of them. I think many of you already are aware of the sustainable development goals. And every single of the sustainable development goals has a connect with the traditions and culture for each of the countries. It's not only limited to India, but to each of the countries who are now signatories to the UN on the sustainable development goals. So when we are talking of the sustainable development goals, just to kind of give you a glimpse, so when we are talking of goal 1, what is goal 1? It is to end poverty in all its forms everywhere. So I'll give you an example from Indonesia. So this particular session, we are not focused only on the Indian knowledge systems, but we are also talking about global best practices and interventions from other countries, so that we in India can understand and adopt the best practices in the traditional. Again, coming back to goal.
Madam,
Traditional textile. Yes, please.
last few seconds you got disconnected.
Okay.
Last 30 seconds. Could you please
So
repeat?
let me just 1 second. I will close my video so that we can gain some bandwidth. I'm somewhere else, so I think
Yes.
there is a bandwidth issue. You can see my slide in the slide mode, right?
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, sure. Thank you. Yeah, so when we are talking of this batik traditional textiles sector of Indonesia, this particular traditional textile sector contributes to generating employment and largely women employees. So what the country did is that they paid a lot of attention to this particular city to kind of enhance and to kind of make this particular batik textile sector as the main economic sector. Thereby, it takes care of not only the gender equality but also in terms of reducing poverty in its population. So this is one important global practice that has been cited worldwide. Goal 2 is on ending hunger, achieving food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture. So a particular example that has been cited very well as a global good practice is about the Seed Swap Festival of the Seferi Hisar town of Turkey. So here what they do is in this particular festival, the local producers bring along with them traditional along with all the other newly developed varieties, which are low cost agricultural practices, and they raise awareness of the need for preserving sustainable food production and consumption. So these are all the seeds that have good productivity. So by swapping the seeds, they are able to bring in an equality among all the farmers, and thereby there is a inclusive growth among the farmers. So this is one very good example. And in fact, even in India, in places like, Jharkhand and other states, there is something called this seed swap festival where, the farmers exchange the best seedlings and the seeds as well in terms of, improving agricultural practices and as well as livelihoods associated with that. Goal 3 is to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all at all ages. So here I'd like to give an example from our own country, that is the National Ayush Mission, wherein when we are talking of the National Ayush Mission, it is across all the states and the UTs of the country, and it provides for access to the Ayush facilities, the co-location of these facilities with the primary health centers or the community health centers or even the district hospitals across the country, provides means wherein our traditional systems of medicine also become important in terms of health and wellness. So this is again talking about the SDGs, goal 3, which is to ensure healthy lives. Goal 4 is about inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities for all. So this particular example that we are talking about in the context of goal 4 is about, South Korea. Is a place called Jeonju, and this is known as a traditional culture city. So when we are talking of this traditional culture city from South Korea, here what they do is that they have a place wherein, all the traditional buildings, intangible heritage and other cultural assets are brought together, and everybody across all ages, children or adults, are invited, and it provides an integrated education platform and as well as a lifelong learning programs in terms of appreciating our own traditional culture. This may be limited at this point of time to architecture and the intangible heritage, but this is a sound example to kind of promoting awareness of our own traditional knowledge and how to kind of preserve and as well as sustain such cultural assets across. So moving on, in the context of our Indian systems of medicine, I'll give you specific case studies to highlight why it is important. And, when we are talking of traditional knowledge, it is always not a matter of relic or archival material. It is to be viewed in the context of our contemporary needs, the current needs, and to see how we can, preserve and promote them as per the needs of the time. So the traditional knowledge need not be in its own native form. Traditional knowledge has always been dynamic to meet the needs of the time, and that is where our creativity, our innovation becomes very, very important. So all of you today know about chess. I think we have many young students coming up in chess as grandmasters from across the country. So chess owes its origin to India. In fact, it's widely acclaimed worldwide also. There's no dispute that chess originated in India. So earlier, the way chess had begun was, it was known as, Palaka, that is a game board. In Atharva Veda, it was called Adi Devana, that is a dice board. In Ramayana, it was called the Ashtapada. Then it became the Dashapada. Whereas when we talk of, Ashtapada, it is 8 to 8, cubes. Whereas when you talk of the Ashtapada, it is a 10 by 10. Then it became became Chaturanga. It became Shatranj, and today everybody knows it as chess. In fact, it has become so prominent across the world that there is an international chess day being celebrated on 20th of July every year since the year 1966. You look at permutations and combinations, everything is, has an algebraic notation when you are talking of chess. So there are about 2000 identifiable variants of chess available today. So in fact, when we are talking of the sustainable development goals, and by my bringing chess as the first example here is to say that when you are talking of chess today, it is of course a global game. As I mentioned, you have an international chess day also, but it promotes fairness, inclusion, and mutual respect among the players and all the people who are involved in the particular game. And it is to also say that because it has a lot of mathematical and notations associated with it, it kind of helps you imbibe creativity, a deeper thinking among whoever is involved in the game. And as per the UN itself, it says chess offers important opportunities in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals for strengthening education, realizing gender equality, empowerment of women and girls, fostering inclusion, tolerance, mutual understanding, and respect. So, from merely being a game of entertainment, today it stands as an example of something that one can achieve sustainable development goals by bringing equality into the picture. So you can understand that when we are talking of our native traditional knowledge, it may take different forms, and today it may assume a very different form, but that is to be respected and as well as kind of taken forward. So I'll give you a few more examples from the domains of medicine. Because it kind of tells you that when we are talking of traditional knowledge, we in India have been fortunate to have these classical systems of medicine like Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, all codified at this point of time. But when we talk of traditional knowledge, at some point of time, all had also been original knowledge. So let's go understand the story of quinine for malaria. So earlier, malaria was, they did not understand what malaria was all about. All they kind of understood is that this emanates from something like a bad air, that is malaria. Okay, and there was no treatment, and in fact, early days, there were some whoever suffered from severe malaria, the treatments were quite barbaric as well. They were bloodletting, especially drawing blood from the skull was something very prominent, just to ensure that by giving out the blood, people would be able to overcome the ailment and get back to good health. So this was all the early stories. Okay, then came a story that emanated from the Andean Indians, where forester traveling from one place to the other. He was having a lot of fever, and he was not very well, but he had to make this particular journey. So he went through the jungles of the Andean forest, and from the river he was feeling very thirsty because of his fever. He saw a pool of stagnant water, but not being able to overcome his thirst, he drank the water. So when he drank the water, he felt that this particular water was can you see the slide on quinine? Somebody has mentioned it is still on chess.
Yes, madam.
Okay.
It has changed, ma'am. It is on quinine for malaria.
All right. Okay. So he drank the water, but when he drank the water, it tasted so very bitter. So he felt very, kind of worried. Did he drink something poisonous? What is going to happen to me? And, all kind of difficult thoughts he had in his mind. But nevertheless, that he had drank the water, he felt that perhaps if he takes a little bit of rest under a tree, perhaps he would be able to overcome the difficulty that he was having, and he rests. Then after some time, he feels that he's sweating profusely, and his fever just disappears. he kind of, connected by his observational skills that it has got something to do with the water that he drank, and because of this only he was, able to overcome the fever. So what he did is that he goes to the village and he shares this knowledge with his fellow villagers, and thereafter, whoever had anything symptoms related to malaria would go drink water from that particular pool, and they were, cured of malaria at that point of time. So then they realized that it has got to do with the trees that were there in the region, and these were all the cinchona trees. And then they started using the extract of the quina bark to treat fever. So while this is the legend, this is the oral story that has been transmitted from one generation to the other, the codified form of this knowledge came in only in the year 1631. And this was when the Countess of Chincona, the Viceroy of Peru, had malaria, and she went to the Jesuit priest because, no home treatment was available, and whoever were the doctors of the time could not treat that malaria, and the Countess was at discomfort. So the Jesuit priest, what they did is that they made a concoction from this Indian tree, that is a chincona. They mixed it with cloves and other herbs, and then gave her this decoction. Having taken the decoction, she then gets, treated from malaria, and then this sets space for using the cinchona bark extract for treating fevers and malaria as well. While this is again a story of how traditional knowledge got codified and was actually put to use, and it not only for the common public or the villages, the rural communities, but also to a person who is the countess of a particular country. Then came, only in 1820, almost like close to 200 years later, that the French scientists Pierre Joseph Pelletier and Joseph Caventou isolated quinine from the bark of the cinchona, and then they started providing purified quinine extract as a standard treatment for malaria. Well, this is a story as of 1820. Only by the year 1944, okay, the synthetic quinine was made by the American scientists, and the synthetic quinine offered fewer side effects compared to the natural extracts. So this is how, a traditional knowledge by observational skills got, translated methodically to becoming a drug, wherein from a natural source, it was a synthetic source, and quinine for malaria was established as a formal treatment. So this is one story. For any kind of infections, especially viral infections, you would know that one gains resistance against, whatever is the prevalent treatment. So you also always need to innovate further to what you have to overcome the resistance related to that particular drug. So this is the next story is of artemisinin. So earlier I mentioned quinine for malaria. So now what I'm going to talk to you about is artemisinin malaria. In fact, this particular innovation also fetched the Nobel Prize for the scientists involved, Tu Youyou. So this was during the Vietnam War. The malaria resistant to chloroquine was highly prevalent. At that point of time, people moved on from quinine to chloroquine to overcome the resistance and as well as stability associated with quinine. And here what happened is that because chloroquine was being used so extensively, it developed a resistance to the malaria. So Vietnam was going through the war. It approached China to kind of provide help to overcome this chloroquine-resistant malaria. So a formal project was launched in the year 1967 on 23rd of May by the Premier himself. So for this particular project, Tu Youyou was selected as the project director. So in 1969, she became the head of the project. She went to the Hainan Island where there was high prevalence of this chloroquine-resistant malaria. She came back to Beijing a few months later. She realized almost like 2.5 lakh compounds were tested for anti-malarial activity, and none of them showed any work. During her education as a pharmacologist, Tu Youyou also happened to study the traditional Chinese So she went back to her roots to see if in case there is anything in these, ancient texts of the traditional Chinese medicine to treat anything related to malaria. She came across a particular instance wherein intermittent fevers, which also happens to be a symptom of malaria, was treated with Artemisia annua. Okay, and this was used since 400 AD. So what she did is that she went back to the lab, she isolated one active compound from this particular extract, and it appeared to be effective on the malaria parasites when tested in vitro. But when she tested the extracts repeatedly, they were found inactive. So she also tried in vivo experiments, they failed. Then she thought that she's doing some error in the way she was extracting the compound. So instead of aqueous extract, she used ether-based solvent, and then she used this extract on mice and monkeys, and she found that this particular extract treats chloroquine-resistant malaria. So she used this extract on herself and another 21 patients from the Hainan province. Everybody recovered. So then she was able to establish that in 1972 that artemisinin, which is also called the King Hersu, was an active ingredient of this, the Artemisia annua, and this can treat chloroquine-resistant malaria. They published the work only 5 years later, in English. And only in the year 1981, the World Health Organization, World Bank, and the United Nations invited Tu Youyou and her team to present the findings, because until then there was no alternate treatment for chloroquine-resistant malaria. So in 2006, almost again, I'm telling you the chronological order because it becomes very important to say that, when we are talking of traditional knowledge, although we may feel confident that this traditional knowledge is very apt and very relevant, but in today's context, each one of us want evidence-based, intervention. So when you are talking of evidence-based, and especially scientific evidence-based, it takes a lot of time. So only in the year 2006, WHO recommended Artemisia annua as the first-line treatment for uncomplicated malaria. And thereafter, in the year 2015, she won the Nobel Prize. In fact, it was a very special moment that something related to traditional knowledge was given a Nobel Prize. So in her acceptance speech, she attributed the discovery of artemisinin as a gift of the Chinese medicine to the world. So this is a particular example of, how from traditional knowledge one can also receive a Nobel Prize. So moving on, I'll give you quick examples of, a few more from other countries, and then we will close the presentation. So here I give you an example. We talked about earlier in our presentations over the last 4 days, we talked about misappropriation, biopiracy, why access benefit sharing is important, why misappropriation needs to be prevented, so on and so forth. I give you one another example of the story of misappropriation. This happens to be something called the Kakadu plum agupinji, and this is a particular plum that is used by the indigenous people of Australia, especially the Mirarr people. And this has been used as a bush tucker or medicine. Sometimes it's also used for skincare and so on and so forth. And as per scientific experiments, they found that this Kakadu plum contains almost 50 times more vitamin C than the oranges, and a lot of scientific work has been done on this particular thing. One very important factor, especially in today's context, is that many people use the skin serum and all that, which is rich in vitamin C to kind of keep your skin glowy and healthy. So in using this Kakadu plum, there was a patent that was filed by a company, American company, cosmetic company called Mary Kay, and they used a combination of the Kakadu plum extract and acaberry, and they say that these effects are beneficial to skin. What happened is that there was a researcher in one of the universities of Australia who happened to know the patent application, and he filed a opposition, a third party observation to the IP Australia, saying that there is no consultation of the local indigenous communities. There is absolutely no permission taken, and this is also traditional knowledge based. So how was the application allowed? So the patent application thereafter got rejected by the IP Australia on the grounds that it lacked novelty and obviousness, and the application was withdrawn by Mary Kay. That is one of the outcomes of any third-party observation of pre-grant opposition. But the sad part of all of this is that while the patent was withdrawn, Mary Kay continued to prepare the skincare product and sell it in the markets, and there was no access benefit sharing. So when they went back to the company to say why are they not willing to pay the communities, the only answer they said is that the company sourced the kakadu plums from the commercial markets and not from the indigenous communities. So there was no requirement to pay the benefit sharing. So there are loopholes in the laws and we need to fix it. And that is what the Australian government also did. So the North Australia Aboriginal Kakadu Plum Alliance was set up in the year 2018 by the Indigenous Land and Sea Corporation. And what the NACPA does is that it is a consortium of all the Aboriginal, that is indigenous community owned enterprises that ethically harvest and process the kakadu plum. This, they also have uniformity in terms of the specifications and other parameters. So it provides stability and reliability to the supply chain of the kakadu plum for various products. So this particular slide that I have put up right from dry powder to nutraceutical to tea to plum oil to serums and face masks and many other, even the what is it? Vitamin C salt, they have diversified in terms of the product. And this particular slide that I have put up is from one particular company called May Harvest. They show how they treat the, they take out the produce of the kakadu plum, clean it and use it so that they maintain this particular stability and the raw material specifications very carefully. So this NACPA ensures that whoever buys the kakadu plum goes through them so that the access benefit sharing is taken care of. So one another example from our own India has been the haldi, right? So we told you that there was misappropriation of Indian traditional knowledge. The patent on for turmeric for wound healing was patented. We went in for a patent litigation, got the patent revoked. And today when you talk of the turmeric market, it is almost close to $115 billion. Okay, so such is the volume and as well as the value of turmeric. It is the most versatile spice. So again, I will not go into the details of each of the products, right from turmeric as using as a spice to as a flavoring agent to haldi drops for overall health as well as skin issues to cosmetics to fragrances, even the haldi doodh, that is a golden milk. And today we also have turmeric tea, pickle, chutney, laddus, halwas, and many more. Again, product diversification becomes very important. So in all of this, we need to understand that, when we talk of, traditional knowledge, it is there, traditional knowledge we do have, but it is very important to be creative and innovative to take traditional form of knowledge and convert it into a format and form that meets the requirements of the current times as well as the future. One another example where, when we talk of traditional knowledge, in the earlier cases I mentioned about, the kakadu plum and as well as the turmeric. So the spice or, the traditional knowledge, you can see it kind of reflected in some way even in the current knowledge. But there are examples where, the traditional knowledge is something, but, the creativity and innovation has taken it multiple fold to a very different level. And this particular example that I'm going to talk to you about is something like that. So there are, we have heard of glaciers, natural glaciers, and the glaciers melt, especially, in today's context of climate change. Sometimes there are accidents, we lose human life, and many other natural calamities happen when the glaciers melt and so on and so forth. But glaciers melting is also important, especially because in those, high altitude regions, you need water for agricultural purposes. And sometimes when the water flows down very quickly, the water is not retained for the agricultural purposes, and it creates a difficulty among the population living in those regions. So man-made glaciers become important. Man-made glaciers are not anything related to today's context. They have been mentioned even in the ancient times. In fact, the story is, again, it is related to oral traditional knowledge, where glowing glaciers was well practiced in the Ladakh region, especially by the people of Baltistan and Gilgit regions of the Hindu Kush range. And here what they say is that they carry, there are 3 or 4 important aspects to creating these artificial glaciers. One is identification of the site, collection of the necessary material, rock cover, altitude, and aspect, so that, there is a site which is, having no direct sun rays falling on it, so that the glacier doesn't melt, the artificial glacier doesn't melt quickly. So there is a method, only men are allowed to do. They go to different places to collect the Poshu and Moshu, that is the female glaciers and the male glaciers. They put together twigs, salt, and many other things too. And then it also brings snow from, a region where it is known to kind of retain snow for a very long time. And then they create these artificial glaciers, put together this oral traditional knowledge that has been passed on from, from various ages, is still being practiced in the regions of Baltistan and Gilgit. Okay, but when you are talking of today's context, it's not easy to bring in huge amounts of snow and these glacier pieces from different regions, right? And especially when you want to build something for agricultural purposes. There is a story from Ladakh, from Chivang Nofal. He is a civil engineer by profession. He is also called the Iceman of India. He was the one who, based on, this particular knowledge of growing glaciers, especially the oral story, the oral traditional knowledge, the story that has been mentioned in those regions, he also saw that, by melting water from the glaciers in summer and freezing it in autumn, it would be able to create an artificial glacier. And this would help melt only during the spring period, so that the water can be provided for agricultural purposes. Using this, he created a lot of these artificial glaciers which are horizontal. So, he composed, this happens to be based on loose masonry walls. And by, creating stepwise such mechanisms, he was able to retain the glaciers for a longer period of time, so that the water would melt and provide for the agricultural purposes. So he was able to build about 15 artificial glaciers at 13,000 feet range, and the smallest was about 500 feet, whereas the longest was about 2 kilometer long. Okay. Nevertheless, because these are all horizontal structures, when the sun rays fall, especially in high altitude, the ice melts and then the water flows down. Okay, and if you are not able to retain the water, the purpose is not met. So there are challenges with these horizontal artificial glaciers. So then came the idea by Sonam Wangchuk. Okay, I think all of you know him by the movie, Three Idiots. And these are what he created are called the ice stupas, inspired by the Buddhist stupas of the Ladakh region. And also because, these, it is made of ice, he called it as the ice stupa. So what did he do? He created polythene tubing that connects the ice stupa from the higher ground, drawing water from to the downhill. Okay, then he put a galvanized iron piping so that there is a sprinkler on the top and all the water gets sprayed. So there is a netting around this, main piping. So when the water goes up and then it comes down, it starts to freeze, and you have a ice stupa created. Okay. And he was able to bring in a 50-foot ice stupa in less than a month. And this particular stupa can store at least 250,000 gallon of water. Okay, and when the water melts during the spring season, the water melts, and you can have, at mid levels water reservoirs, so that the water that is melted, these reservoirs are still able to hold the water, and this particular water can then be diverted to agricultural farms, so that the agricultural needs are met. Okay, using this particular hypothesis behind creating the ice stupa, he was able to create a lot of these ice stupas, and the beauty of it is that even at lower altitude one can build such stupas, and this is being replicated in countries like Switzerland, Chile, among others. So this is something, as I said, the story that I mentioned, by bringing glaciers together, putting different other materials and creating artificial glacier to the ice stupas is very different. But nevertheless, it is all built upon what has been, heard as a story, and then with creativity and innovation, one has been able to overcome the challenges and build something that still has roots to our traditional knowledge. The last example that I would like to talk to you about, so far that we had talked, is largely about, medicines and, certain things like the ice stupas and all that. I'd also like to talk about, something called the talim. Talims are, symbolic codes that provide for intricate patterns in carpet weaving, especially from the Kashmir region. Traditionally, these talims are, like codes that are, provided in our ancient texts, especially in the Kashmir region, and using those codes, designs are created. And following these talim codes, it takes a lot of time, more than 6 months, to complete a carpet. But what happens is these talim codes are for smaller pieces, okay, and then these smaller pieces of carpet are woven, and then they are brought together to build the entire big carpet. And if you make one mistake or two mistakes in any of the pieces, the final structure is not what you would expect. So there are, risks associated in making a carpet using this traditional method of the talim codes. So what we today, in today's context, there's so much of technology available to improve upon the traditional knowledge. Okay, so what this people, group, the international virtual assistance group had done is that they used computer software to handle the design and creation of the talim codes, including the weaving and knotting. Okay, and what they do is that while the talim codes, the design and creation is made by the computer software, once the whole design is made, you can easily see which are the sections that have errors in it. So you are able to spot the problems in advance and cut down the errors associated in weaving the carpet. In today's context, the same community is looking for artificial intelligence to see how to improve upon further to these computer softwares that are available. So we are able to, even in terms of cultural expressions, we are able to bring technology and traditions together, so that we meet the requirements of the contemporary times, as well as improving upon the livelihoods of the people. So coming to almost the last slide here, when we talk of, TK inspired innovations and all that, it is not in thin air that we talk about. We need to build on the heritage that we have been given, and ours is a very valuable, invaluable heritage, I would say. So the national IPR policy that we mentioned has, in the vision statement, traditional knowledge included in it, and even in the context of the TKDL, we have national IPR policy giving clear directives, including that, other areas need to be covered under the TKDL, and also it needs to be, opened up for access by others, so that we can improve upon the R&D and innovation components of, of our traditional knowledge. So when you talk of the national education policy, I think most of you come from academic backgrounds. The knowledge of India still will hold a very important aspect in not only the school curriculums, but also the tertiary education, the college education, and so on and so forth. So both education and innovation have very distinct mention of the traditional knowledge in its policies that makes our lives easy. In fact, even in the G20 New Leaders Declaration, it was clearly mentioned that culture will be a transformative driver of the SDGs. They talked about protecting the living cultural heritage, including the intellectual property, so that misappropriation and over commercialization does not happen. So to conclude my talk, I would like to say, na choraharyam, na cha rajaharyam, na pratibhajyam, na cha varakari, vyayekrite vardate evam nityam vidyadanam sarvadana pradhanam. So I'm sure all of you understand that we need to ensure that our knowledge grows, and the only way it can grow is by using it across different aspects of life, and that way we'll be able to meet our motto of protecting, preserving, and promoting the traditional knowledge systems of India. Thank you so much.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much for giving this kind of lecture. Always you did. It's your lecture always with a smooth sound and clear and concise. Thank you very much, madam. So we can start the next session. And before
We can
that,
take, no, we'll take few questions and then you
yes,
can open up
yes,
the link.
that's
Yeah.
okay. Let me unmute. So we request all the participants, please raise your digital hand if you have any question. Yes. Namaste, Dr. Vrijesh. Could you please ask your question? Or Namaste, Dr. Induji. Could you please ask your question?
Good evening, all. Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, myself, Dr. Indu. I'm an Ayurvedic doctor. So my greatest concern is that we are belonging to the traditional knowledge system, but we still have a lot of like people who say that this is not the correct knowledge. This is all bluffing. This is not the system is inappropriate. It doesn't have a value and so on. So do we have any kind of protection policies which can provide us protection that to preserve our knowledge and say these fraud people who tell about bad things about Ayurveda, do we have something like that? I was asking.
No, see, this kind of criticism is there even for the modern SNT. There are always different schools of thought that, kind of question each other's
Yes, ma'am.
results, So that is common. I think we need to take it in the right spirit and move on, because if we cannot be laid back by only criticism, we need to see how to progress forward. And I think if we have that as the clarity of mind, we will be able to do wonders. No, see, here in today's context, much of our traditional knowledge is more like prior art information,
Yes, ma'am.
okay? And lives have changed. When human lives have changed, plant lives and, all other things that we have been using in that traditional systems may have changed. So at different points of time, we need to have a reinforcement in terms of the evidence. And that is where in today's context, we talk about evidence-based medicine and nothing more. It's not to kind of question, whether the traditional knowledge is right or not, but to kind of say, yes, it works even today.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Namaste, Tejaswini ji.
Hello, ma'am. Yeah, thank
Yes.
you for the wonderful session. So my doubt was, so if we know a particular knowledge that has been followed, let's say now that turmeric, it was followed everywhere in the household, and we did not think that it had to be, noticed, right? Like that, we have many aspects. If we take, for example, ghee, it has so many properties that we are not sure on what properties people might patent, right? So if we have to, do it, like what are the requirements? Like if I have to take, consider that as a traditional knowledge, what I should do further? Should I mention all the properties that is there in Ayurveda and followed in the household, and then where should I submit the, the article? Like I'm trying to understand the process. Like what should we do if we come across a knowledge? So what is our duty towards it?
So when you have such knowledge, you can always write a review article. Okay, in addition to, see, when you're talking of any research topic, we go with lot of, very rigorous prior art research survey, and we analyze what is the information content in there, identify what is of our interest also, and what would be the resource requirement to kind of do any experiments if in case we plan to do that, and then we step on to doing the experiments and sharing the results of it. So the literature survey becomes very important, right? So whatever you mentioned, you can write that as part of your review article. And many journals, do accept review articles, including the Indian Journal of Traditional Knowledge, which is run by our CSIR sister institute, NISPER, and also All India Institute of Ayurveda, the CCRAS, and many other international publishers also bring in a lot of journals to publish review articles. In addition to you also have popular journals like Science Reporter and similar such in the country, wherein, it is not more of a scientific article, but it is more of a general article that you want to convey general information. Such room is also available for publishing.
Okay. So we need to publish the whatever the information is there, and based on that, it will be added to the traditional knowledge.
No, we will not add it to the TKDL. TKDL is very specific in identifying old books. Okay, so we rather restrict ourselves in the interest of the content, to classical text and not the contemporary popular articles.
Okay. So how do we approach to the TKDL? Is my
TKDL is that, what we do is that if you go and look at our website, we have covered close to about 300 odd books that where, the information is already published on the TKDL database. We have covered 647 such books for transcription purposes. So the 500,000 entries that we are talking today is all from these 647 books.
Okay.
So what we do is that we have a lot of experts, say Ayurveda, from Unani, from Siddha. So they mention what are the books that we need to cover. Okay, and we also get general recommendations from other people also. We then take it back to the experts. So there is a long list of books that is drawn. Okay, then we call for committees, wherein we have again national experts from across the country whom we call, and then we prioritize the list. Okay, because everything is resource intensive, resource dependent. Okay, so we prioritize the books in terms of the content. Okay, and then we start the transcription process. So that is how entries into the TKDL are made.
Okay, ma'am. Sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Namaste Sandeep ji. Could you please ask a question? Next.
We'll stop at 4:30 so that they can take their
Yes.
test at 4:30. Yeah. Another 3 minutes.
Yes, we can take another one. Dharani Dharji. Dharani ji, could you please ask your question? Or you can check chat box once again.
Yeah. I think they're all waiting for the assessment.
Yes. So, should we move to the next session? Madam, there is no question in the chat box.
All right. Okay, fine.
So we can close the live. No?
Yes,
That
please.
would be good. No?
Sure.
So before we close the live, we just want to inform you. So regarding the feedback form will be shared very soon, and result of the assessment, you will receive your result through mail. I will release the result in the Google form, and we request all of you to be connected with our social media and our website www.iksindia.org. So once again, to pranam all of you, see you again, and please share your thoughts through our Google form, that is the feedback form. I will share very soon. Pranam madam, pranam sir, all of you.
Thank you so much, Piyush, and best